Can you hear me? Can you hear me in the back?
I have in the middle.
Paul Alonso, can you hear me?
No, it's not,
Paul, can you hear me?
but not through the mic.
Not through the speaker? Do I need to hold it closer to my mouth? Okay. If you're using a mic, hold it closer to your mouth. Um, Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to have you here. This is going to be an exciting event today, precisely because of the people who are here. We have a great crew. We're going to start off with a word of welcome from our Executive Vice Provost for Research, Tim Lewin. Tim himself is quite the Renaissance interdisciplinary man who, although he's an aeronautical engineer, aerospace engineer, is also worked in the Energy Institute. We were at a meeting a few months ago and he was talking about having just been reading in Herodotus. And I was going, what is an aerospace engineer doing reading Herodotus? And I think he has a great appreciation for what we do here. And so I'm very grateful that he is here to support us both with his words, but also the Office for the Executive Vice Provost for Research has also contributed a significant amount of money to this conference. So I really appreciate that. Tim?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm very excited that Georgia Tech is doing this, and I think just from so many different perspectives, just both my personal interests, my own personal reading, and I do enjoy travels with Herodotus's travels. I think the reference there that we had there was the story of the tall poppies. I think that's where I was quoting that to the group. I can't remember the exact context, and then. But I mean, I think just for so many reasons, what you all are doing here is so important to kind of and I think our conception of what it means to be a world-class Georgia Institute of Technology. And you know, there's a couple pieces to that. As one is just I would say is just the creative element is just that as humans, we create, we discover, and just to, whether it's poetry or whether it's music or whether it's technology, I mean, to me, I just see that as all part of this wonderful creative endeavor, and just being part of an institute where that's all we're throwing in the pot and we're mixing it, and it's just having this great intellectual community, this great educational community where that's all happening alongside is just so mutually enriching. I think the other part too that just strikes me as why this is so important is just obviously as an institute of technology, just the profound role of technology on culture, on human behavior, on just watching just how humans interact with each other, just over the last decade, watching how humans how those interactions look just with just different social networks is so being a place that's reflective and thoughtful on because at the end of the day, technology is not a thing in and of itself. It's a tool used by our culture, by our society. We are all humans, we're all people, and so these are things that we really want to be thoughtful about. And so I don't need to tell all of you this, but we had an AI conference the other day, we had a materials conference the other day, and I was giving opening remarks and just talking about how at the end of the day, whether we're doing really cool metallurgy, those materials can be used in the hands of a surgeon to save someone's life, or in the hands of a murderer to take someone's life, right? I mean, at the end of the day, these are technologies that are used by a people, by a culture, and so, or nuclear energy, or AI, or whatnot. And so, again, I just want to just emphasize how important this is. And so, I think for those of you who are here at Georgia Tech, my encouragement is not to be shy. To be out there, to be strong advocates for what you're doing. Sometimes at a place like Georgia Tech with where we've got $1 million contract here and $1 billion thing there, it's like, no, we need to thoroughly embed these humanistic, creative elements in everything we do. So I think with that, I'll just welcome, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me to kick it off, and thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate it. And I should have introduced myself. I'm going to be about 5 minutes, Michael. So you can stay there if you want. And I'm gonna just try and give us a layout for the day, and just tell you how this whole thing came into being. I'm grateful to Tim for his remarks that he joined us today. I'm also grateful for Richard Utz, the interim dean of the Ivan Allen College of Arts and Sciences, who will be joining us shortly. He'll probably be speaking at the end of the first lightning rounds because of another schedule conflict. But the work that Tim and Richard have done in this institution has laid intellectually and administratively the groundwork for what we're doing today. My name is John Lyon. I'm the chair of the School of Modern Languages. I'm one of the 4 school chairs who arranged this event. Professor Kelly Ritter of Literature, Media, and Communication, Professor Victoria Thompson of History and Sociology, and Professor Cassidy Sugimoto of Public Policy are my co-conspirators in this, and you'll hear more from each of them today. I was going to say a number of months back, but I think it's been almost a year now that we got together with Jason Freeman, now the Associate Vice Provost for the Arts, to talk about the role that humanities play at Tech. And we appreciated the strong support for the humanities and the impressive faculty output in the humanities, whether in teaching, research, or creative projects. It's clear that the humanities are valued at Tech. There was a mini conference this past fall called Humanizing STEM, which emphasized the importance of what the humanities and the social sciences do for the STEM project. And so we're grateful for that support that we see here at Tech. But we also felt that there was a need for a gathering point for the humanities at Tech, something that would foster more interdisciplinary collaboration among the humanities, as well as between the humanities and the STEM fields. We asked, what would such a structure look like at a place like Georgia Tech? And how would it be structured so that the humanities are not simply an accessory to STEM, but an equal partner, co-collaborators in doing really interesting things that, as we say in our mission statement, improve the human condition? Would it be a more conventional humanities center, a humanities lab, a cluster of thematically focused research collaboratives, or something else? We saw that addressing this issue was important not only for the humanities at Tech, but also for the humanities in the age of AI. In today's world, the humanities will need to reassess their contributions to higher education and to society. The future of humanities at Tech and at technical institutions in many ways may be a future for the humanities in general. What the humanities do at a technical institution may no longer be a niche phenomenon, but the vanguard of rethinking our discipline for the coming years. So to address these issues and to plan for our future, we organized this workshop, bringing together an impressive group of people whom you will meet in the course of the day. These are important administrators from Tech. You've met Tim. I'm grateful that our incoming dean for the Ivan Allen College, Amanda Murdy, is here with us. Thank you for joining us, even though she's not on our payroll yet. Our Associate Vice Provost for the Arts, Jason Freeman, who's here, also helping sponsor this. The Director of IPAT, the Institute for People and Technology, Michael Best will be joining us today, and many others. I probably left out some names. We've got funders from a variety of important institutions around the country. We have deans from leading technological institutes in the country. We have directors of humanities centers from state flagship universities, and our own faculty in lightning round presentations. You're going to note from the lightning round presentations that we do not attempt to define what the humanities are. Instead, we take all comers. We see if you self-identify with this, if you feel called by what we're talking about, we want to include your project with us. And so we want to bring this overview of the higher educational landscape of both technology and the humanities together today to say, where do we go from here? There are many people who deserve thanks for making today's event possible. First, our generous sponsors, the Charles A. Smithgall Institute, the Office of the Executive Vice Provost for Research, the Ivan Allen College, the Vice Provost for the Arts, the Schools of Public Policy, History and Sociology, Modern Languages, and Literature, Media, and Communications. In addition, there have been many on the ground, many feet on the ground and hands at work making things come together. Those individuals are listed at the end of your program, but I would like to highlight in particular Kimberly Bass-Seaton, the overseer of a team of highly capable staff from across the 4 schools. My graduate student researcher, Eileen Cox, who's created the programs that you have, put together the slideshows, and coordinated the lightning rounds, and Taya James, who made all of the hotel bookings, took care of a lot of other details. And so I'm grateful to them for the talented group of student workers we have. I would appreciate if you join me in giving them a big round of applause. So we're going to start with the lightning rounds. And I just have to let you know, my area of specialization is German literature. And Germans have a certain reputation. The German train system no longer upholds this reputation, but they used to be known for being punctual. And so I have a little bit of that in me. So I'm going to be keeping track of time. And in good German tradition, we'll do that in reference to soccer, and we'll have yellow cards and red cards. Remind you of when your time is up. We want to keep this moving smoothly so that we have time for speakers later today. And I want to make 2 quick notes on the schedule as well. First, there have been some last minute changes to the program that you may have seen online. We've lost one of our lightning round presenters, so we're now down to 15. The representative for the National Endowment for the Humanities, who we had originally scheduled, is not here today for reasons that should be obvious to anybody who reads the news. And just a side note on that, please write and call your representatives to support the humanities. And finally, we will have a different presenter for Schmidt Sciences than was originally listed on the online program. We're actually going to have one person, Yvonne Ploter, here in person, and then 2 other people patched in from Schmidt. So we'll get a good representation from Schmidt. The second note about the program is that bios for each presenter are available not on the printed program. We just didn't have enough pages. I don't even know what I did with my program. If you look on the last page of the program before the notes, you'll see a QR code there. And you can go follow that QR code and get bios on each of our speakers today if you'd like to know more about them. With that, I have the good fortune to launch the first batch of our lightning round presentations. We had an impressive number of submissions for these lightning rounds. And Richard, are you ready to go right now? Why don't we have you go right now, and then we'll start the lightning rounds. Michael, you've been very patient. I keep on declaring, but we're building the suspense.
I'll call you on punctuality.
The interim dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, Richard Utz, who's launched a year of the humanities. No, year of liberal arts.
We extended it.
We extended. Year of liberal arts is here. We're grateful for that, and we do this under those auspices as well. Richard.
Thank you so much, John. My sincere apologies. I get the chance to walk with our president once a month around campus to talk about things that one otherwise doesn't get to talk about. You know that opportunity, and so it took a little longer because the president decided to take a detour. Otherwise, I would have been here on time. Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. So this is going to be really short because you didn't come here to hear me. I want to take, if Victoria is not against it, a historical approach to this event, and just mention some things to you that some of you may know and some of you may not know about the history of the humanities at the Georgia Institute of Technology. So the liberal arts, including, of course, writing instruction, literature, history, and more, have been part of Georgia Tech since the first day of classes. Because our colleagues in engineering who started this institution knew that the engineers needed to know how to speak and to write well. And so, the first humanities classes at Georgia Tech are as old as the institution itself. We added modern languages in 1904. That's not that long afterwards. And I guess there was another idea that the university leaders had, that adding instruction in, at the time called foreign languages, was a good idea. In 1910, Georgia Tech President Matheson explained that a liberal education at Georgia Tech, I think he was using the word liberal in the 18th century sense of that word that many of you are familiar with, that a liberal education at Georgia Tech was necessary for producing, and I quote, future engineers capable of communication across fields. So that's the first time we actually have an actual statement from a university official about this. So in addition to communication skills, humanities education expanded to include artistic expression. Do you know that since 1913, we have a drama club at Georgia Tech, which then evolved into Drama Tech, which is the oldest ongoing theater production in the city of Atlanta, which is kind of fascinating. I think they celebrated their 80th anniversary 1 or 2 years ago. Okay. Then of course, what happened? We started to branch out and compartmentalize, right? Additional fields, a lot of new knowledge came into the academy, and so we started in 1933 a subject called technical English, right? Which then involved, of course, into technical communication at this institution. Yeah, the engineers were required to write technical papers, reports, business letters, and things like that. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to other breakthrough moments at Tech, specifically 1977. Well, if I ask you what's important about 1977, I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't guess what I'm talking about here, but it was actually science fiction that became a subject at Georgia Tech with the Professor Bud Foote, whose collection became what now is the only fully fledged book collection in our library. Science fiction, for obvious reasons. So much of what Ivan Island College is today is difficult to imagine without the late 80s. So we had a Georgia Tech president at the time, John Cursine, and he proposed a controversial idea. It was controversial. It was discussed by many people on this campus, whether we should do it or not. Would it be the end of Georgia Tech as they knew it at the time or not? He said, raising the profile of liberal arts at a technology-focused university needs the creation of a college of liberal arts. I don't think at the time they were specifically thinking also that would be the only way to get into the AAU. That's a thought that was added later on. So and even so, which means that in 1990, this is actually the beginning of our college. For those of you who've been here for a while, it doesn't sound that long, but 1990, that's how young our college actually is, based on the developments that I just explained to you. So, and we did, even before that time, have the only degree in liberal arts, Cassidy, by Georgia Tech was a 1-year Master of Science and Technology and Science Policy, or TASP degree, which was housed in the former School of Social Sciences, which included what then later became the Schools of Public Policy, International Affairs, and History and Sociology. When people ask me, so Richard, how did you get to this point? And they ask me, because we're pretty successful with these liberal arts degrees at Georgia Tech. And I say, well, some of it was planned, but not all of it was planned. Some is accrued and just happened because of the specifics of our institution. So summer of 1991, inauguration of the Language for Business and Technology program. That's how far LBAT goes back. That was at the time, and still is, I think, a 5-week, different lengths, summer program. At the time, it started as a 5-week summer immersion program focused on language skills around careers and commerce. You realize that all of these things that we've been doing were always linked to the specific niche that we inhabit at Georgia Tech. 1992, first Literature, Communication, and Culture degree, a Bachelor of Science, Technology, and Culture, or STAC, was offered. And of course, STAC combined the STEM disciplines with the study of culture, history, and the arts. Poetry at Tech. That was one thing that surprised me when I looked at my job at the time, that we had an endowed chair in poetry at the Georgia Institute of Technology. But Poetry at Tech, under the leadership of Thomas Lux, brought high-profile poets to Georgia Tech, as well as new and exciting voices, and we became, one of the centers for this in the Southeast. 2004, Georgia Tech launches the nation's first doctoral program in digital media. We were first on that one. As many of you know, Janet Murray is retiring after this year, and of course she was involved in founding that and moving forward that program. So we have a long list, but I'm coming towards the end. Georgia Tech students have actually been showing increasing interest in humanities courses and students in Georgia and beyond that. Two examples, and I hope it's going to stay that way. Language study at Georgia Tech, according to last year's numbers, was the most popular minor on our campus, right? And please put that in relation to the number of students who actually major in the humanities or social sciences, which is much, much smaller. Right. We hope we can keep that, but we're going to compete against AI-oriented minors that are popping up all over the place. So we'll see how that goes. Overall, we've been bucking the general downward trends at so many other institutions, not the ones we invited for today. I happen to know that, but maybe that's why you're all here. First-year applications to the Ivan Allen College, so this is not the humanities separate from the social sciences, but to the college, have more than doubled over the last 5 years. I have to use applications because yield is based on our general admissions policy, which keeps a cap on who may attend Georgia Tech. We could have twice as many students in the college, although we wouldn't know where to put them, as you all know. But so we're generally doing well. This year, our college is running more than 20 events as part of the Year of the Liberal Arts here at Georgia Tech. I made that up because nobody had done it before, and I thought it was the right time because we were really gathering a lot of momentum. We had a major event that, if you didn't hear about it, it was called Humanizing STEM, which brought practitioners and our school chairs, our unit chairs together, including our commanders, our ROTC commanders, in order to talk about what do we really do and how do we do it. And I thought that was pretty revealing for many of us. So this event today takes us one step further, and I'm really grateful to John, his fellow chairs, who are co-sponsoring, and to every single one of you who is participating, especially to our guests. And you're visiting us on a day that follows news about the National Endowment of the Humanities, right? So I know that you, dear guests, you'd have many other things to do right now in order to talk with faculty who fear, for their grants, for their support, for their subject matter in some cases. Special word of thanks to you for coming here. This is about the humanities in ways that we haven't really discussed them today, right? Really about how do we practice? What is it that we do in the humanities? And sometimes even without thinking about being at Georgia Tech, because that's also sometimes a healthy experience. I know that. Thank you again very much, and good luck to the event.
Thank you, Richard. And now, after much ado, we're going to start off the lightning rounds with Michael Hoffman. Michael, thank you for your patience. And, I'm just going to list the names of each presenter as they come up. We're not going to do lengthy introductions. We're just going to move this along. Michael.
Thanks a lot. So I could hardly wait for the moment to start. When I talk about the role of philosophy in the development of AI, you might think about ethics that shapes the design of AI technologies. But the project that I want to talk about today is different. It focuses on innovations in philosophical research that will be used to create new AI systems. This project is a collaboration with Mark Finlayson from the Florida International University. He's a computer scientist there. One starting point is the observation that there's a lot of talk in AI research about ever improving reasoning abilities of new AI systems. But the understanding of reasoning in these innovations, it turns out, is rather limited. What is missing in particular are reasoning tools that are able to take into account the perspectivity of knowledge. What we mean by this is the fact that what counts as knowledge often depends on the perspective of the knower. The perspectivity of knowledge is crucial for reasoning on so-called wicked problems. These are problems where the main challenge is not to come up with a solution, but to understand that it might not even be clear what exactly the problem is. With regard to wicked problems, it is controversial what the problem is or which strategies are acceptable to deal with it. These controversies result from heterogeneous background knowledge, different social and cultural experiences, worldviews, values, or social identities. So in our project, we plan to develop a philosophical theory that identifies and describes forms of reasoning that are required to cope with the multi-perspectivity of wicked problems, and then to use this theory to improve AI techniques for reasoning. So that's the project. Let me illustrate the problem that we address with two examples that show the limitations of current large language models. Yesterday, I asked generative AI, is immigration good or bad? The answer began with, immigration is a complex topic with both positive and negative aspects. Here are some points to consider. And then it listed pros of immigration and cons of immigration, so arguments for and against it. But when I looked at these arguments, it turned out that positive and negative aspects are only considered on a societal level. There was no consideration, for example, on how immigrants think about this question or the countries where they're coming from. This touches on one of two important aspects of wicked problems. In my own research on wicked problems, I argue that the first step for dealing with a wicked problem like this one must be a stakeholder analysis. Before we say anything about a wicked problem, we should know first who is affected by any decision about the problem, and second, what these people think about the problem. And now it is rarely the case that there are only two stakeholders that can be put in a clear binary pro-con alternative. The second aspect that is crucial for wicked problems is, as I mentioned above, the challenge to determine what exactly the problem is. This can be illustrated with my second example. I asked the system, how could Atlanta's traffic situation be improved? I mean, that's all close to our mind, I know that. The answers, you should look it up, are really impressive. I got an excellent set of 6 possible strategies. They're all great. However, when you approach a wicked problem like this one, not only with a stakeholder analysis, but also with a participatory approach, because nobody knows better about possible effects of a decision than those who will be affected by it, then you will see that the stakeholders might not agree on what exactly the problem is. Is this a problem of getting quickly from A to B, or should pollution be taken into account? Or the question of how to deal with the creation of heat in a dense inner city, or about living conditions in a city, and so on. So the framing of the problem is a crucial element of wicked problems. All this shows, and this is my final word, I saw the sign and I'm punctual, how important it is to study reasoning that is required to cope with wicked problems and to develop tools that can support these efforts. Thanks very much.
just note, we'll save all the questions until after all the presentations. Robert.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Robert Rosenberger. I'm one of the philosophy professors here in the School of Public Policy. I also serve as the coordinator of the IAC graduate level certificate in science and technology studies. And in my field, the philosophy of technology, I'm currently serving as the president of the Society for Philosophy and Technology. And I wanted to take this opportunity to sort of put on the table a topic area that I think that the humanities at a place like Georgia Tech are especially well suited to address. And that's questions like this. How do issues of design in general and issues of the politics of design in particular influence what we notice? How do they influence what we fail to notice? How does design shape what jumps to our attention, right? How does the politics of design influence sort of what's on our minds, right? So I wanted to plug the school of thought that I'm coming from. Me and my colleagues work from a school of thought called post-phenomenology. That's my word for the day. It's a group of us who are doing a sort of deep description of user experiences of technology. It's an international and interdisciplinary group working in philosophy of technology and STS and several fields to talk about these things. We put together some ideas from pragmatism and from the history of phenomenology, but rather than talk about post-phenomenology here, I think maybe a better way to describe it would be to talk about some of my own lines of research coming out of this stuff. So for example, I do work on the topic of driver distraction, right? This is my book that came out just last year on this topic. And the idea is something like this. The scientific research shows that we're really bad at driving while we're talking on the phone, right? That's true even when we're using a hands-free phone. In fact, it's equally true when we're using a hands-free phone. So I've been using these ideas to help try to describe what this distraction is like. So I'm using post-phenomenology to talk about the cognitive science of driver distraction, but also the sort of habits of user experience that can lead to this kind of driver distraction. What our minds are on, what's happening in your mind when you're looking out the windshield and not perceiving some things that are relevant to that experience. There is a public-facing part of this kind of work. I do some public outreach. This is, for example, just a magazine article I wrote for Psyche magazine just last fall, trying to communicate these ideas to the public as well. But I want to talk about another line of research as well, which is I do some work on the politics of the built environment, politics of public spaces, and in particular, I do work on the critique of anti-homeless design, right? So what a bunch of us are arguing is that there's sort of a lot of designs in public spaces, the design of, say, parks, the design of benches in parks, where trees are placed and not placed, the design of fire hydrants, trash cans, surveillance systems, those things together, but also laws that target people who are living unhoused, police procedures that target people who are living unhoused. We argue that these things all sort of come together to push homeless people out of shared public spaces, right? And actually effectively to downplay or hide issues of homelessness. Now, I have a lot to say about all of that. Yeah, there's a public facing part of this too. I've been trying to raise awareness of these issues. I wrote for The Conversation just last summer. But to bring this back to issues of what we perceive, then there's an arm of this research that is about what it means to be someone who's not targeted by these designs, right? To be the people like us in this room who are not targeted by these designs. And what does it mean to be someone moving through a public space and not notice that the space was designed to push other people out of it, right? What are the habits of perception there, right? So I've been bringing together ideas from post-phenomenology and from feminist epistemology to ask questions about, like, how do issues of knowledge, how do issues of privilege, how do issues of habits of perception, How do issues of the politics of design shape what we don't notice about the politics of our technologies and our environment? So if you're interested in that, maybe we could talk about that stuff. Thank you.
When is learning a language the difference between life and death? A couple of weeks ago, we lost another member of the deaf community, a young man who left in his suicide note the phrase, "If only my parents had learned to sign to me." This young man suffered from language deprivation. So this often happens when people do not teach their deaf children sign language. 95% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. Most of those hearing parents will never learn enough. Most of those hearing parents will never, so 95% of deaf children will born hearing parents. Most of those hearing parents will never learn enough sign language to teach it to their children. That means in the first 5 years of life, the critical language learning period, these children will learn neither English because they can't hear it, nor sign language because their parents aren't signing. Now, the reason for this is that parents often try to sign to their children, but here in the state of Georgia, it takes about an hour's worth of travel for each sign language lesson. Sign language is about as hard for English learners as Japanese to learn. Even though it's the third most commonly studied language in colleges and universities in the United States, Georgia Tech does not have a sign language program. So one of the things I'm here today is try to encourage you to help me create a sign language program here on campus. But I'll tell you about the program that we're working on right now. Celeste Mason, who's a research scientist over there, and I are working on. We're trying to make it easy for hearing parents of deaf children to learn sign language. Now, how do we do that? Well, what we're trying to do is make a game which brings sign language lessons to the parents. Parents often try to learn sign language, but because they have multiple children, they can't find a babysitter, it takes an hour for every sign language lesson, they soon give up. But they do want to learn sign. So one of the things we've been doing is working with Google and others to make a game that uses sign language recognition. Oops. We'll get there. To help hearing parents of deaf kids learn sign. So it turns out that learning language in the first 5 years of life is really important. It's how you get short-term memory. When I say to you something like 45156, you're going to repeat it back to me. That's your phonological loop. Deaf kids of deaf parents can also do the same thing in sign language. It's the deaf kids of hearing parents who might be suffering from language deprivation who never form a language properly that actually have this problem. This leads to a 45% sexual abuse rate, a 50% physical abuse rate, 50% unemployment rate, 7x increase in mental health issues, and 60x increase in suicide rates. What we're trying to do is enable sign language be taught to all children. It turns out, we know from the baby sign movement, that all infants can benefit from advanced language skills from learning sign language first. And so by making these games, by encouraging sign language in schools, by encouraging everybody to learn sign language, we can actually turn this around and help save some lives. Thank you very much.
On the white slide and it just.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Helen Ann Curry, and I'm the Kranzberg Professor in the History of Technology. My research has long focused on agricultural science and technology, with a particular focus on innovation in and management of agricultural and horticultural plants, fruits, grains, fibers, flowers. Since 2020, I've led the project From Collection to Cultivation, Historical Perspectives on Crop Diversity and Food Security, with funding from the Wellcome Trust UK. Together with a team of researchers, a total of 6 doctoral students and 4 postdocs to date, I've been studying the varied tools, labor, knowledges, and technologies deployed in the making of novel food crops around the world. This research seeks to upend a dominant and politically powerful narrative in which plant breeders and the multinational corporations that today employ most of them are credited with generating value from global crop diversity. These private actors are empowered to capitalize on that attribution through ever stricter intellectual property regimes. And these property regimes have in turn facilitated dramatic and frankly dangerous consolidation of private industries in the crop development space. So writing against the dominant narrative of discrete and individualized moments of innovation, which typically focus on specific breeders and specific genetic recombinations, my project team's historical and ethnographic accounts of crop innovation instead highlight myriad additional actors whose knowledge and labor contribute to transforming crop genetic diversity into new fruits, grains, and vegetables. Among other outcomes, this research aims to sustain arguments and actions towards a reapportioning of credit in crop innovation. This in turn is necessary to rethinking the unbalanced and insecure structure of today's global seed supply. Some collective outputs of this project are already available, but I think the most exciting collective output of the project, and the one that will most effectively illustrate its overarching argument, that political and intellectual agenda I've just described, is an edited volume entitled Seed Genius: Reinventing the History of Crop Innovation. So Seed Genius brings together 45 essays, some written by historians, but also social scientists, plant breeders, gene bank curators, seed keepers, bakers, and others, in rewriting the history of crop innovation. The idea is that these stories together will illuminate what the composer Brian Eno calls a scenius, that is to say, the genius of the scene, as opposed to that of the individual, around the making of crop varieties. So just to give you a few examples, the farmer Jay Bost tells the story of Go Farm Gold. This is a tomato variety that emerged out of a farmer training program in Hawaii. The historians Chia Li Chu and Iris Lin explore Taiwanese farmers' development of grafting techniques and tools in the production of new pears, including a variety that successfully revived the industry in a rural area. The anthropologist Joeva Rock and maize breeder Manfred Ewell write about the work of many public institutions in Ghana, facilitating the development of a high-protein maize variety. The evolutionary botanist Natalie Alassi Canales and biodiversity conservation expert Kennedy Zela examine the role of Quechua culinary traditions in Peru in the development of oca diversity through the example of freeze-dryable varieties like hatun. And I could go on, obviously, you saw the slide with all of the examples, but this would take me well over the final minute. I'll instead have to hope that you see the range from these examples that I've given and from the list here on the slide. And I'll close just by noting that through this final collective work, what the project is, it's not only striving to deliver on its intellectual agenda, but it's also inviting many who are not humanities researchers to participate in the writing of history, to participate in humanities scholarship. And that's really why I wanted to share this particular part of the project with you all here today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Singh, and I'm a sociologist in the School of History and Sociology, and I'll get started today. So I want to share with you a project that really engages with social science and humanities, and that created a documentary called Navigating Autism in Communities of Color. The process of making of this documentary really is based on research that I had conducted, interviews and observations of families who are navigating services for autism in the Atlanta metro area. And what I found was that there was serious disparities based on race and social class for people to get a diagnosis and people to access particular services. Awareness was also desperately needed. At the time, there was an opportunity for funding to create a public project that really engaged with civil and human rights. And so I reached out to my collaborators and in different groups who were invested in this kind of project. And they really said, you know, a documentary would be great to raise awareness. And so what I did was I reached out to our humanities department and specifically John Thornton, who is director of film and media. And we together worked on a project with another collaborator who started the Color of Autism Foundation. So after 2 years, we created this project, and I just want to highlight the impacts this project has had. A year ago, we launched it here at Georgia Tech and had over 250 attendees. This was during spring break. So the people who were there were people from the community. They were people who had children with autism. They were people who were engaged in research. They were people who were engaged in the treatment and diagnosis. We've been invited to 6 film festivals across the United States and invited to many different screenings here in Atlanta and beyond. And one of the things that's been really excited is, as someone who doesn't make documentaries, is that I've expanded this way of learning into my classroom. And so my students this semester are creating mini documentaries about brain health conditions to learn more about the illness experience. And this is something that I've connected with the NeuroNext initiative in terms of funding and projects towards this end.
And so this documentary just demonstrates how the humanities can expand research that's being conducted and elevate it in a way that you couldn't do in a traditional sense. And so what we wanted to do was imagine what would a future humanities center look like, and how could it serve a purpose here in IAC. And so we believe it can do 3 things. First, it can cultivate the facilities that we need in order for this thing to occur. Second, it can connect interdisciplinary teams across the institute and across the college. And third, it can ignite exciting projects that can serve as a creative incubator. What we wanted to show is a very short clip from our documentary that captured this essence of the project that we hope to, or the story that we wanted to tell. But it also kind of demonstrates this pattern or this system that we wanted to create. So here we go. This model is not new. This is a model that you can see if you look at Arizona State's Humanities Lab. You can look at the Franklin Humanities Institute at Duke University. They are both examples of ways that institutes are bringing together scholars and artists in order to examine questions in a very unique way. So with that, we'll say thank you, and we appreciate the time.
Hello, good morning. This is a short version of the long title that I have here in the program, which is Satire, Hybrid Alternative Media and Creative Writing in the Digital Age. I'm Paul Alonso. I'm a professor at the School of Modern Languages. My journalism, my work deals with journalism, entertainment, popular culture, and sociopolitical discourse, and the convergence of all these in today's polarized democratic societies. Um, I've been working particularly on the issue of political satire or sociopolitical satire. This is the first book that I published on the topic. It was published in 2018, and it was the first book to deal with sociopolitical satire in Latin America in contrast to the US from a regional perspective. And it condensed some of my original ideas on the topic. I've mainly asked the question of what is the role of sociopolitical satire in today's polarized societies in heavily controlled national media environments. This book was particularly for the case of television, which is, particularly controlled in nations with highly concentrated media outlets. I also introduced a concept to understand satire, which is critical metastatement as negotiated dissent, which really refers to the self-reflection critique of satire as a form of entertainment that is also being critical of the media system itself and the sociopolitical establishment, and at the same time it is part of the entertainment industry. No, so it's a very insider kind of self-reflective form of critique, very unique in today's media environments, especially for television. No, this book connected the U.S. experience with how Latin America adopted these kind of global genres of political satire and how they responded to their own national contexts. So it also has to do with global media flows and how global formats are adapted, localized for national realities. Um, I then expanded my research to just digital native satire, which is a different kind of format, a different type of platform, which has other kind of restrictions, which were very interesting to study and to understand in contrast to other platforms like television or like magazines. One of the main things is where the whole concept of hybrid alternative media was further developed in terms of how many of these independent alternative media projects were also created by a lot of journalists or comedians or a mix of both that were trying to fill gaps from traditional mainstream media that they felt was not covering properly their sociopolitical realities. No, it also develops the idea of how today's independent media negotiates their space to transgress in heavily controlled media environments and in places where freedom of expression is recurrently under attack. I've also, those two mainly focus on Latin America in contrast to the US. I've also done some other work on satires that do a more holistic transnational political critiques, and magazines, satirical magazines that were most popular form from the 20th century. Actually, at the beginning of the 20th century, I think they stopped coming out in paper, but they were also very revealing of how satire is being produced and how it reacts to particularly traumatic sociopolitical contexts like military dictatorships or big social or economic crisis, etc. And finally, I have also tackled the issue of satire for particular cases or infotainment in the case of Peru, and as a fiction writer and through as a practitioner, as a creative writer, I have also written a satirical novel that deals with actually these issues of, from an insider's perspective, of how the journalism industry changed at the beginning of the century. Thank you.
Hello. Can we do research on racism without considering how it intersects with species as well? Well, without acknowledging speciesism or the discrimination against other animal species, we can inaccurately attribute racism just to intra-human dynamics, rather than seeing its roots in broader systems of domination over non-human and human life. Also, without considering that, we will not see how colonialism didn't just exploit racialized people, it also reorganized human-animal relations in ways that reinforced racial oppression. Without acknowledging both racism and speciesism, we are not going to be able to see the role of agriculture in racial oppression, how immigrants and refugees work in factory farms under horrible conditions, how they have to kill so that meat is on the table of those who do not want to work there. We also will miss environmental racism, how with the intensification of animal agriculture, we see the displacement both of indigenous people and free-living animals. And most of all, we will miss dehumanization, even on the level of presidents who call immigrants animals. So to help with this, to help researchers consider both at the same time, me and my colleagues developed the MARS test, or the media analysis of racism and speciesism, and we tested it on the Oscars. The Oscars are very famous, they're very influential, lots of money go there, but they had a racial problem. They were so white. They also had a problem with species where they did not consider animal workers, and there was no category that actually appreciates them, and that is a big problem. So the MARS test that we developed has 3 groups, 3 sets of 5 questions, 15 questions together. Each question is a yes and no question. It could be used for quantitative analysis and for qualitative analysis. If most of the questions in the movie you analyze are yeses, then the movie is ill with the sickness of racism and speciesism. If most of the questions are no, then you get a clean bill of health. The 3 categories are animated animals, animated humans, and animated intersections. I'm just going to briefly mention some of these questions. For example, in the first group, question number 2, are the non-human characters deprived of their own species-appropriate goals? For example, are they serving humans instead of themselves? Are they solving human problems? Are they functioning as symbols? Third question, are the non-human characters captive or treated with violence? Or the last one, does the film ignore or misrepresent human and other threats to non-human habitats and welfare? In the second section, for example, are the racialized characters mostly background symbols or metaphors? Do the racialized characters, human characters, fulfill harmful, simplistic, or racist stereotypes? And in the third section that we're still finalizing, for example, the first question, are any racialized human characters dehumanized as subhuman, animal-like, or transformed into animal characters? Or the third question, does the movie hide or make light of the role of agriculture in racial oppression, such as how animal agriculture displaces racialized humans and non-human animals, or harms their health or well-being, or how racialized labor is used to farm animals that end up on the kitchen table? One example from the third section is the movie Spider-Man, in which we have the introduction of the first Black Spider-Man together with with Spider-Ham, and we have both racism and speciesism at the same time, disqualifying the Black character, having him to be propped up by the white Spider-Man, and at the same time, we also see how Spider-Ham is being mocked as a plate of bacon, and etc. So we took a sample of 9 years, 90 movies from the Oscars, and we also focused on the animation, full feature and also short animation movies for over 50 movies in the end of the sample. When we applied our test, these are some of the results. We have twice more Asian representation in the Oscars in these 9 years than in the previous 15 or 16 years. However, we also have most movies represent the culture which they talk about, especially Latin culture. However, Black representation is very bad. It hasn't improved. And cruelty against animals is present in 9.5 out of every 10 movies. Consider how we educate our children. Thank you.
Thank you to our presenters for an impressively rich array of topics and methodologies. I was fascinated, and I appreciate them keeping to time because we have 10 minutes for questions now, which I was very much looking forward to. And I want to open it up to you to ask questions of any of our presenters from the lightning rounds in this first round. Any thoughts, reactions? Things you want to know more about? Yes.
I wonder whether any of the presenters could talk about ways in which they engage people on the STEM side to be part of their projects.
Ways in which they engage
people on the STEM side to engage in the projects.
Thank you. So our presenters, how did you engage or could you engage people on the STEM side to be involved in your projects? Any initial reactions? I think it's a very fitting question. Yes.
I'm working a lot with artificial intelligence, so that's STEM, and we are very strong here at Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech is organized in a way that's very easy to connect to other people, so that's great. And so the collaboration that I have with this colleague at the International University of Florida, that went back to a project that the Georgia Tech Research Institute initiated and invited me. So it's easy. That's what I can tell you about that.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, Paul.
Well, in my case, since I deal with media studies and the evolution of a particular genre, technology and in the evolution of media has been particularly determinant in how we approach this kind of genres, especially for independent media development. No, so I do think that the history of technology and flows of technology globally, and particularly in my case to Latin America, have been determinant important for my research.
Thanks. And I can just add quickly for the work that I've been doing, which includes the volume that I talked about and some other projects. Most of the scientists, plant scientists, plant breeders, others in that space that I end up engaging in the project in more involved ways are folks I first started meeting because I was interviewing them to learn about their research, right? So, and maybe that's a little bit straightforward in some ways, but as a historian of recent and contemporary science, folks I've talked to about their work, hoping to write and learn more about it, then become involved in the questions of history themselves, and that it's through conversation, basically.
I guess I would have to say that we are more on the STEM side, so we're actually kind of coming from the other direction and getting involved in a lot of the LMC side. Yeah, yeah. So mainly what I was going to mention, part of what Thad's project has been doing is taking a lot of like the people in digital media. We have a lot of students now with a vertically integrated project we have for students to start creating these games, and we're moving in more of a narrative direction. So we're going to try to incorporate storytelling into a lot of the games. So I guess we're kind of interdisciplinary, and we're hoping to get more involvement from people all in the LMC side and humanities here. So that's cool. Thank you.
Other thoughts, other responses to that, or also other questions? I see Thad has a question, and then over here as well. We'll start with that. I think Thad was, go ahead.
I noticed that you talked about sign language. Is there some way that we can have sign language taught more generally to the whole population? Because there's so many people who can't hear. And I've taken just a little bit of sign language, but I've been very helpful. I've been able to be helpful to people who were in a situation they needed somebody to speak to do sign language. So if you can make it more general, that would be so good.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Where'd you learn? Okay. We should talk. By the way, my sign name is this. Another thing I should mention about getting involved with the STEM folks, there's an organization Celeste belongs to called IPAT, Institute for People in Technology, and it is cross-disciplinary across the institute, and it's a really great way to actually do these collaborations and get together. But I have my own question. Suppose I want to make a documentary on those twins, the hearing and deaf twins. So where's my documentary people? There we go. So how would I go about that? How do I get a documentary started doing the on those two twins and start talking about other silent voices I'd like to have supported by a documentary?
Pass it over to you and then talk.
So that's a great question. One of the things that I love to do is collaborate with individuals who are doing some really exciting work like what you're doing. I believe I met part of your students at the VIP pop-up or something. And I think your table was right next to ours. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that's an amazing project. We'd love to collaborate. But we have done work like that for like the Strategic Energy Institute, where we have developed content for them. Jennifer was an amazing colleague. She reached out to us and said, hey, this is an idea that I have. So if it's something that you are interested in, I think that we should definitely have a conversation so we can make that happen. It is a lot of work. I think Jennifer can attest to it in the sense that we really need to understand what the story is that you hope to tell. Who are the people that you want to incorporate and include into the documentary? And if there are any opportunities for students to be involved and at what role, right? So we planned this for maybe it took a year, but we did a lot of pre-interviews first. We spent maybe the first 3 months just interviewing people on Zoom, trying to identify our storytellers. After that, then we scheduled. We shot for about, okay. And I can tell you that we had probably about 3 terabytes of data from those 2 weekends. So after that, it's a lot of work. But if you are game, then I say let's do it.
Thank you. Natalie, and then Anna, Giselle, and then we're going to have to pause.
I want to add up to this topic, and we as a planet have a huge problem, which mostly stems from humans ignoring the planet and everybody else on it and focusing only on our own human interests. including imagining that we are very different from everybody else, such as we have language, and ignoring how like other species have other forms of communication, and language or oral communication is just one type of communication. So the project of teaching all humans to have sign language is not only equitable for all humans, and it helps, equalize them, but also helps to recognize how other species have forms of communication that are mostly in body language and some also oral. And so that would help against anthropocentrism, against our focus only on our own interests and benefits, and make us more likely to want to contribute to the solution of our crisis currently.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you for all the presentations were really rich and exciting. I'm curious, you just mentioned the role for students, and I heard you talk about students being involved in kind of creating the games. I was wondering about some of the other teams, how you're involving students into your research, if there are classes that could help with collecting data or analyzing data, just ways that students are involved in the research projects as well.
Thank you. Any takers responding to that? I saw Paul's hand. Let me.
Thank you. Well, I do have a satire and media class, which of course deals directly on the topic, but also we have produced a lot of content related to media in Latin America with students as a VIP group first, and then as part of another kind of classes or independent studies. So we have produced content about Latin American media, including satire, but other forms of entertainment. Also have this project called Polivisión, which is a bilingual publication about popular culture and media culture in global media culture in general, with a focus on Latin America, that I have developed with students for the past 8 years.
I see 2 more hands, but we're also at time. What I would ask you to do is to take your questions into the coffee break, which you've all worked hard and deserve. It'll be right out there. We can't bring it back in here, I'm sorry. But thank you again to our participants for excellent contributions. And I look forward to talking to you after the next session.